Well, first of all, thank you very much for making it back into the room on time and very promptly. We're now going to kick off our next session of the day, which is really focusing on how does the UK kind of maintain its competitive edge. This panel is going to be chaired by Vinous, who is both Deputy Executive Director of the Startup Coalition, an organisation that techUK works very closely with, but also is an alumni of techUK as well, so somebody who's very well known to techUK. So I'm going to hand over to Vinous to introduce the panel and kick us off. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I guess it's true what they say, you never really leave. Thank you all for making it back after lunch. Very fortunate for me, I've got a brilliant panel with me today, so hopefully, there will be no sort of, need for a nap throughout this. So I will quickly do introductions for the other panellists, and then we'll get cracking. I'm going to make sure that I leave enough time for questions, because I know some of the most interesting questions won't come from me, but will come through from the floor. So we're really delighted today to be joined by Alan Mack, Member of Parliament and Shadow Secretary of State for Tech, Janet Coyle, Managing Director of Grow London within London Partners, and Kirsty, Director of Tech Policy at Labour Together. And our brief is to sort of tackle the enormous question of UK competitiveness. So I guess a sensible starting point is to hear from all of you on where you think the sort of state of play is today. And Alan, if I can start with you. Under the previous government, the UK managed to hold on to its sort of tech crown as sort of like the leader in Europe. It'd be really interesting to hear your reflections on what made that possible and how we sort of maintain that crown going forward.
Well, thanks to techUK and thanks to everyone for joining us today. As you rightly said, when the last Conservative government left office, we had turned the UK into a major tech power. And the aspiration of the next Conservative government is to turn Britain into a major tech superpower. But what we've seen from Labour in their first few months in office is lots of steps that actually hold us back from doing that. So the last Conservative government, for example, created a very positive investment environment where we increased business investment in R&D by 30%. We ended up with more unicorns than any other European country, and more importantly, more than France and Germany combined. We led the world in developing AI, and we developed the first AI safety summit, which other countries have copied. We had a strong broadband rollout, and we had this sense that Britain was open for business, and we had the tech crown, as you rightly said. And what we need in the next Conservative government, and which we're not seeing from this Labour government, is a low-tax, smart regulation approach. In their first few months in office, Labour have increased national insurance contributions on the tech sector. That punishes the smallest, most vibrant tech startups, and also hurts the most junior and less well-paid employees. So that is a huge hindrance to the growth of the tech sector. We've also seen EU-style approach to AI and copyright. We've seen a heavily statist approach to tech generally, whereas what we actually need is an agile, fast-moving, tech-literate government, and we're not seeing any of that. So we think that Labour are reversing many of the gains that we made under the last Conservative government. We're determined to change that, but in the meantime, we will keep harrying them to change course, because tech is too important to get wrong. Tech is the driver of Britain's future prosperity, our next generation of jobs, startups and prosperity for our communities across the whole country, whether it's the Golden Triangle, the Oxford-Cambridge Arc, or those clusters across the whole of the UK. Tech is vital to the UK's economic growth and our future, and we must get it right, and sadly Labour get it wrong.
Thank you. That's a bold start. Kirsty, perhaps I can come to you next. I mean, tech is a driver of prosperity, and I think probably everyone on this panel, regardless of sort of party stripes or otherwise, would agree as that as sort of, being the diagnosis, and clearly Labour are now sort of like pushing for growth. You've got a really privileged position of sort of, directing tech policy for Labour Together, which arguably is a very sort of, influential player on the landscape. So in your eyes, how do we sort of, take that next step and make sure that the UK sort of retains that crown?
Yeah, well, needless to say, I don't see it in quite the same terms as Alan. I think that Peter Kyle is...
I'm in the middle.
Yeah, you'll be in the role of honest broker. I think Peter Coyle has made exactly the right decision to set DSIT up as a delivery department and an economic department. And I think that the governments that's coming to power last year have made some really important steps in starting to make clear the fundamental rules of the road in terms of sorting out the regulatory environment for data through the Data Use and Access Bill. I think they've made brilliant steps towards getting to grips with the challenge and the opportunity that is AI through the AI Opportunities Plan and through endorsing the 50 recommendations in there. And I think they've done something that is really important that the Conservative government prior didn't do, which is to invest in public sector capability. So I think you talk about a sort of statist approach, but I think it's wrong to draw such a sharp distinction between public and private sector these days. I think we all recognise that we won't get a competitive, fast-growing, innovative, agile tech sector unless we have a public sector that is able to understand and keep up with that pace of change, that can procure accurately, that can offer support, that can regulate in a smart and agile way where necessary. So those two things have got to evolve together in a kind of symbiotic way. And I think Labour and Peter Coyle have done a brilliant job of setting up the new Digital Centre for Government in DSIT and putting out the blueprint for digital government, which sets out some really exciting, ambitious ways that government can make better use of technology, not only when it's designing and delivering its own public services, but when it's interacting with the private sector and when it's kind of setting the rules of the road for the digital economy as well.
And Janet, I mean, I guess, there will be multiple approaches to this, but fundamentally at the end of the day, sort of, it's businesses who will have the ultimate say and who will sort of judge as to whose approach is better. So from sort of a business perspective, what do you sort of see the state of play today in terms of sort of UK competitiveness on the sort of global scale? We've talked a little bit about Europe, but sort of more globally, and what do you think is sort of, driving that sort of push?
Sure. First of all, can you all hear us? I had a couple of people. There's a no here, there's a yes there. Can we ask the techie to do it a little bit louder? Thank you, Sue.
I can also shout, so and I'm sure my colleagues can too.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here very much in London as a global city, travel a lot and do hear perspectives around the world. And probably about a year and a half ago, the narrative was very much, when is the UK going to be stable? They really want, international investors want that stability in terms of a government. And we are seeing that now. We are sort of seeing that sentiment of the UK is stable, irrespective of your political party, but they are saying, we do like the fact that it's stable. We have now, from a London perspective, we do work across the UK, but from a London perspective, we're London's growth agency. We're a non-profit, so we work with businesses every day. We've landed about 120 tech businesses into London in the last year. Now, London is still the number one globally, but we cannot sit on our laurels. It's very, very competitive out there. I'm sure we'll go on and talk about AI. We're the number two globally from an inward investment perspective with AI. We've seen a huge amount of AI companies coming in, a lot from Silicon Valley, but from other parts of the world as well, partly because of what you've been saying about the real ambition by the government, the adoption, but also because of the talent. They're coming here because they want talent is their number one driver of global foreign direct investment, without a doubt. But then you have got the light touch regulation, and you've got the access to leading, research at the universities, etc. Dubai's the number one, in case you're wondering who's the number one FDI. They're doing a huge amount to attract investment into their city right now, and many of you have probably been out there recently. But it is very different, and I think we as a country need to be really proud of our diversity, or the way that the regulation will be very ethical, will keep hopefully inclusivity and diversity at the core of that. So as we look forward, we've just launched a London Growth Plan a couple of weeks ago, and that very, very much has frontier innovation, so tech at the core, but also an inclusive talent strategy. We can't have growth without helping people right across the country access the jobs that this growth and technology is creating. Otherwise, I feel as a country we might have failed if we look back in 10 years and think, oh, we've got this phenomenal growth in technology, but we've left half of the people behind. So that, for me, is one of the big, really important pieces that we can collectively work on.
If I can follow up specifically on sort of the global picture, I think, we've heard it said a number of times now that actually, you know, we can talk about competitiveness, but it's who are we competing against?
Yes.
Are we still sort of, you know, putting ourselves in the sort of rankings amongst the US and China? Or as you sort of travel around sort of European capitals, whether it be Paris, Frankfurt, Berlin, etc., is it about actually making sure that we sort of, you know, retain that that sort of like foothold almost as the European leader? Do you see that as sort of, can we do both?
It's a really good question, because a lot of the data that Deal Room produces, we produce. You know, we are comparing ourselves against Paris, Berlin. We continue to do that. You know, you look at VC investment last year, what was it, 10.8 billion into startups here. AI was 3.5 billion. And, you know, the narrative is that's more than Paris and Berlin combined. And we get quite excited about that and we push it out there. So my feeling is we should be collaborating with other European cities and not constantly feeling that we're in competition with them. And I think the more we can work with their innovation hubs, their research hubs, and start to build this really strong European tech sector and really be proud of that around the world. London always seems to come third. If it's VC investment, it's the Bay Area, New York, then London. If it's wider, it tends to be China, North America, UK. So that is a narrative that's continued. I'm not sure what will happen now with what's developing in the Middle East. That is one to watch. But I think, and again, with places like Singapore, that's got incredible innovation right now. And I know there's lots. I was out there 18 months ago. The FCA were there. There was half of London out there, actually. It was a FinTech week. And it was fabulous to see all this collaboration happening. And I think our ambition with the new growth plan is, let's all talk before we go. Let's make sure that we collectively work out which markets we want to really go and amplify the UK, and let's do it together and have much bigger impact with techUK and with many others. So I think we need to be more ambitious.
And I think that point, Alan, that, you know, if it is that London becomes increasingly more competitive, becomes that sort of, you know, hub for talent, for growth, for the sort of like the most innovative companies to base themselves here, but that's not felt around the rest of the country, then can we say we succeeded? So how do you sort of see us squaring that circle, making sure that, yes, we're pushing London forward, but the country isn't, as a whole, isn't left behind?
Well, I think we should lean into the fact that the Golden Triangle is a very successful cluster. So I don't think any growth around the rest of the country should be at the expense of the Golden Triangle. I've just come back from a trip to Manchester where I met Manchester Digital and a whole bunch of tech startups. I went to the Graphene Centre. We're going across other parts of the UK, and there are lots of tech companies and tech clusters that are going to be very successful. So you're absolutely right. We should support and make sure that actually the other parts of the country that are successful, not just London and the South East, but the reality is London is an extremely successful tech and finance cluster. And there are just 2 points that the other panellists talked about that I want to just bring some clear blue water about. So the first thing is that we're very clear that it is the private sector, entrepreneurs, startups, innovators and engineers that will create growth and drive our economy. It isn't going to be the regulators that Rachel Reeves wants to have breakfast with. They're not going to create any startups or drive economic growth in this country. We believe in entrepreneurs and the private sector as the driver of that. And secondly, I'm very clear that I want London to be the preeminent European tech sector competing with China and the UK. I don't want us to be subsumed in a larger European entity. If you ask the French or the Germans, they ain't looking out for us. We're looking out for ourselves, and we need to make sure that London is preeminent. I've just come back from Singapore, where I was talking to local tech startups and others, and they were absolutely flabbergasted that Labour let the AstraZeneca deal slip away from their fingers. Many of you remember that we negotiated a £450 million deal with AstraZeneca to expand its vaccine life sciences factory up in Merseyside. And when they became to power and AstraZeneca wrote to the Chancellor, they didn't get a reply. They wrote to the Business Secretary, very slow reply. Wrote to the Tech Secretary, didn't get a reply. And instead of investing in our country, they're now investing in Canada and Singapore. And that is an example of the difference in approach. Whereas we will be hungry, we want the UK to be preeminent. Labour has been very sloppy and has let other people race ahead, and we won't do that. So we want to be globally competitive, and that means being the best that we can be, not trying to let others accelerate ahead of us. And that means making sure that the whole of the UK is science and tech positive, supported, and that when foreign investors come to places outside the UK, we're taking them seriously.
Fantastic. Kirsty, I mean, in part responding to that, looking at sort of like the industrial strategy is the sort of totemic piece of legislation framework plan for sort of industrial growth, and digital forms one strand of that, but actually, you know, it's far broader than that. How much do you see digital actually underpinning that, and how do you drive some of that investment that Alan and Janet have talked to through getting the industrial strategy right?
Yeah, before coming to that, I was just going to make a related point about the international competitiveness point, which is maybe like slightly controversial, but we have seen ourselves sometimes as kind of vying for second place after the US. And I think actually now the way the political situation has evolved in the US means that there are entrepreneurs and firms and researchers and academics there who no longer feel like it's the right environment for them. And I am confident there will be teams in DSIT thinking about this, but we should be thinking about how we build the UK into a space where we can welcome those firms to us and those researchers and those technologists either to the UK for the first time or back to the UK. I was speaking to a VC a few weeks ago whose business model was previously based on helping UK startups move out to the US to scale up. And he said he was starting to get his first calls from firms wanting to make the move the other way because of the political situation. And you mentioned diversity, equality and inclusion, and I think that is having the sort of values and the environment and the kind of the kind of country where people want to be and want to build their business will be absolutely essential to our attractiveness internationally. So I think that point's worth making. And about the industrial strategy, I think that clearly digital is not, it's almost such a broad horizontal enabler of the economy. It almost doesn't make sense to talk about it in, as pretending it's a vertical. We have to keep it as a vertical, otherwise I wouldn't have my job working on tech policy. I would just have to say, okay, I work on all policy. But
most
I think
of us here could pack up and go home if that was the case.
Yeah, exactly. It suits us, and I think it's something. It's a lens through which it's right to look at other sectors of the economy and other bits of policy. But really, it is so fundamental and so integral to the rest of the economy that it's difficult to separate out. I think the industrial strategy so far is good. If we were being super radical, I think it would really only cover two things, which would be energy and AI. That to me would be a very radical and bold departure from the way governments have previously approached these things. And it wouldn't mean that you don't give attention to other sectors. There is a bit of a tendency at the moment for policy conversations on tech to collapse immediately into AI, which, the two things are not synonymous, right? There's a lot to technology other than digital, especially other than AI. And if you build the level of autonomy and innovation and creativity and sort of risk tolerance into the public sector that I want to see, then you can have better relationships with tech sectors, all year round. You don't have to have this one thing, which is the industrial strategy, and if you see your sector's name mentioned in there, then great, and if not, then everything's lost. Our relationships between public and private should be much more kind of lasting and nuanced and better integrated into the way we make policy and the way we make regulation. So the industrial strategy is at one important moment to step back and think about the way our country and our government is supporting this sector, but I think it's not the only one.
And do you think, specifically thinking about how the industrial strategy is sort of structured, given the rise of artificial intelligence, etc., does it make sense to sort of think about this through the lens of place? What are the benefits there, drawbacks? And I'm happy for anyone to sort of come in on that question.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the true promise of the internet, right? We should be able to live and work wherever we want if we have a true information economy. And London is this unique and brilliant thing that will, and the Golden Triangle. Likewise, we have the advantage of some amazingly well-established tech hubs in the UK, but we can have more, and we shouldn't be thinking only in terms of these existing places. We should be thinking how places like Manchester are leading the way here. The kind of innovation ecosystem there, whether it's universities or local government supported innovation and growth organisations can work together and develop a unique offering there that supports the growth of tech sectors locally.
Yeah,
Janet?
if I could just come in on the whole place question, which I think is critical, was as we look forward, whether it's across the UK, whether it's across the 33 boroughs in London, we're looking at whether, we're calling it frontier innovation, so AI is very much part of that. And interestingly, in the growth plan, we have actually said tech is everything. Tech is right across every sector. And I kept wanting to dial up the tech part of it. But frontier innovation is any of these new innovative technologies that are coming out of the universities that we want to really help get the funding, get the access to market, help them scale here. So that will be obviously growth capital as well as the initial seed funding. So there's a huge focus on that. But then we're also looking at place in terms of how can we develop the right clusters, but working across the UK. But when you just look at London, you've got Imperial, who've created their sort of West London, they're calling it their West London corridor, but that corridor goes right up across the UK, and it doesn't just stay in London. But they're sort of building this cluster, a lot around health tech, climate tech, and AI innovation is driving the growth. And they're now building, with links with Ghana, with San Francisco, with Singapore, Bangalore, they established a presence there last month. So they're really doing that as their cluster there. And then working with other places, I think the biggest challenge, and this might be the same across the UK, it's identifying what that cluster really wants in terms of an anchor tenant. Is it a big pharma company? Is it a big robotics engineering company? What do they want? And then, collectively with government, techUK, us and others, we can drive that investment into that place. But I think some of the biggest challenges is helping these different cities, boroughs, regions work out what is there, what do they want to develop, and then look at a long-term plan. That's not going to happen in 12 months. We need to be looking at a 10-year strategy of building that place and then making sure the skills are developed to meet the new jobs as well.
And Alan, internally, you'll be looking at your own sort of, 5-10-year strategy, making sure that you're sort of a government in waiting. And we've heard sort of both Kirsty and Janet talking about how tech is everything, which makes your job incredibly difficult, right? Because it means you have to be everywhere. So how do you sort of think about how you work with colleagues to ensure that every policy, every initiative that the team are building in opposition has sort of tech at the heart of it and has that idea of sort of, growth, competitiveness, sort of leading the charge?
I mean, you're right. Look, for us, technology is built in, not bolt on. And across every department, as we launch our policy commissions, which will be coming on stream in the coming months, we want to make sure that actually we're utilising technology to make sure that everyone across the whole country and in every sector benefits from it, whether it's established clusters in London and the South East, or some of the amazing businesses I met in Manchester in the North West, or in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, the North East, the South West. There are so many fantastic entrepreneurs and nascent clusters that actually we want to develop. It was the last Conservative government that created most of the metro mayors. We believe in smart devolution. We want mayors, councils and others to be leading the charge in terms of making Britain a high-tech adoption society. It's only through being that we can actually race ahead of our competitors. So I'm very optimistic and positive about what the regions and nations of the UK can do. We've already seen fantastic work in some of the clusters that we've already mentioned today, and actually making sure that a focus on tech and tech investment is visible across all our policy areas is certainly one of the things that I am leading on.
Fantastic. I think that's enough from me, so I'm going to throw it out to the crowd. I'll try and take a couple of questions at one time, so if everyone just sticks their hands up and then I'll go round the room. Don't be shy. So I will start off with the two gentlemen in front here.
Thank you. I go to other countries, I don't know if you people do, but when I go to Milan or Paris or Frankfurt, it's pretty normal that in Frankfurt it's a meeting full of Germans. Milan, Italians, all this. When I go to meetings in London, I'm often the only person born here. And yet no one is talking about the tragedy that is our immigration policy for skills. I actually genuinely thought it could not be worse than the racist incompetence of the Home Office under the last government. The new government has actually somehow managed to make it worse. We cannot attract smart people to the UK, lots of whom want to leave Trump's America, lots of whom want to leave the Peasants' Charter of the AIEU Act and come to a business-focused country. Yet, the Home Office throws away their passport. We have civil servants with a degree in French, apparently that is a degree still, arguing with someone with a PhD from Imperial that their work isn't innovative enough. Can you imagine what a degree in French enables you to do this? They lose their documents. They will not let their children come. So you want an innovator to come to the UK, but his family can stay in whatever country.
Okay, so a question about
The question is,
how...
what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to sit there shooting at each other across some partisan barrier, or are you actually going to have an immigration policy that serves British business?
Brilliant. And we'll go next question, and then I will sort of summarise and ask it back. I think it was Craig there.
Hi. Yes, it's Craig from techUK. I cover the environment stuff. In Europe, we've seen sort of elements of the Commission member states tear each other apart over what's more important, being competitive and business friendly or the environment. And the UK, I think we've seen rumblings of that happening in some of the public chat about moving to net zero, circular economy stuff. So what does the panel think about how do you prioritise the environment and economic competitiveness? Because in Europe we're seeing this is a very live debate at the moment, and there's some significant watering down of some of the key sustainability goals.
Brill, thank you. So the first question, I'm going to phrase it like this. How do we make sure that we're developing sort of domestic talent whilst also ensuring that we are open to talent from wherever it comes from, by ensuring that the Home Office recognises that? And then the second question around, is it a trade-off between being environmentally friendly versus pro-growth, or is that sort of a misdemeanor, a sort of red herring? I'll come to you first, Kirsty.
Sure, yeah. Congratulations, questioner, for waking people up from their post-lunch naps, if they were in them, if anyone was in them. I think, yeah, this is like a key part of our competitiveness. I absolutely agree. Like, we have to be able to bring in talent. We have to be able to allow companies to hire the right people. We have to be able to allow mobility of ideas and of researchers, so that we can build on our strengths to have that thriving tech sector. It's hard. I think that, the government is doing that in a context of record high net migration numbers, and it needs to be able to show the public that the democratically elected government of this country can meaningfully control who does and doesn't come into this country. And I think part of that, the answer to that, is going to be getting a tight grip on illegal migration. And part of that will be having a smarter approach to our visa routes and our legal migration routes, so that we can show that we're taking into account the kind of things you talked about, and we're getting the right people into the country. But I think that's, it's genuinely one of the hardest trade-offs when you think about this excitement and this kind of energy and this opportunity around tech, and where it starts to bite, where it comes into contact with other policy objectives. And there was another bit about, the second question about environment and regulation. There, I think it's not entirely in tension. I think there are investments and technological advancements that we want to see in clean energy that are going to be good for the economy and good for the environment. I think it's not all zero sum. But I think, again, there will be also some hard trade-offs, and I think there is probably you sort of alluded to this, I think there is a bit of a consensus in the policy community, at least, that the quantum of rules and regulations that we have allowed to build up over decades and actually centuries is constraining the economy to the extent that it is hard to build physical infrastructure, it is hard to go about running a business, and we need to address that, and Labour has made some moves to start doing that, including with the announcements today about changes to consultation requirements. So I think there are some smart and targeted changes you can make to make it easier to build in physical terms as well as economic terms. And there are some investments and some bits of scientific progress that will be beneficial to both those sides of both those objectives, right? We all want to see a greener, more biologically sustainable UK and one that's growing. And I think, you know, we are not anywhere near the frontier of how well we can protect the environment and how far we can push growth yet.
And Janet, if I can come to you, you talked quite eloquently about sort of talent and how the UK is still that sort of like diverse melting pot that brings sort of talent in from everywhere else. But the other side of that coin is obviously ensuring that there is, you know, homegrown talent is cultivated and allowed the opportunity to flourish. So, you know, how do you see sort of, you know, London or the country as a whole sort of pushing forward on that agenda as well?
We speak 300 languages in London, so that's something, again, to be really proud of, but it's obviously not enough. So when you look at tech strategies and how we can upskill people right across the UK, right across London, we're looking at an inclusive talent strategy at the moment, and that involves lots of different elements, as you can imagine, right from making sure, you know, these high-growth tech companies that are really scaling. A lot of them, I work with them every day, and a lot of them, they're on WhatsApp groups saying, does anyone know a good engineer? Does anyone know a good marketing person? This is not the way to build an inclusive talent team. So we're working with hundreds of scale-ups and also companies coming into London to help them understand how they can access talent right across London. And we should expand this across the UK, admittedly, to what the college is doing, what's Ada College doing, what talent's coming out of the universities that they can tap into if they're wanting machine learning. A lot of them actually aren't wanting that deep tech talent, they're wanting sales or marketing. So we're doing a really big piece around that, understanding also what the corporates are needing in terms of tech talent and how to just connect the dots, because that isn't really happening at the moment. And then there's the whole development of skills, and I'm sure the government are looking at this as well in terms of how do we have a pipeline of talent to service, you know, the future of the tech needs, really. And there's lots of great charities doing a lot of work on this as well. But we all need to work on this collectively, whether it's public, private sector, charities, non-profits, because it's fundamental to the success, really, of this industry. And then just to touch on the environmental and energy piece, I agree. I mean, the whole net zero and the green agenda needs to be hand in hand with growth, and there's sometimes a little bit of tension there. If we're building, you know, big quantum or big data centres, what does that mean for the environment? But I do get a sense that there is that ambition to do both and keep sustainability, the green innovation at the top of the agenda. Again, it's at the top of the London Growth Plan, and it's still an ambition to be net zero by 2030 in this city. That's a big ambition. But what we also find is a lot of the really early stage startups, they don't feel that they've got the time or the money to invest in the whole net zero piece. So there's a real challenge there as well if you're looking right across the different size of businesses.
And then, Alan, politically, I mean, both of these issues rely on public trust, public confidence, etc. So how do you build that into, as you're looking sort of, you know, internationally to make sure that the UK can bring in the talent it needs to grow, as you're looking to sort of, you know, drive growth through both infrastructure investments, through net zero, whatever it might be? The public is obviously going to be critical in ensuring that we sort of achieve those objectives. So how do you see the sort of conversation with the public in terms of bringing them on side, but also listening to their concerns?
Well, I think making sure that our tech sector has the right skills and labour force and ensuring we have good homegrown talent. They're all very interconnected, and in terms of the public, look, there's a very strong public sentiment. They want illegal immigration tackled head on, but everybody's very supportive and sympathetic of having highly skilled talent coming into the UK to help grow our economy, help to support our tech sector. So as we develop our new immigration policy, there will always absolutely be a strong channel for talented people to come to the UK to contribute to our economy, particularly our tech sector, which relies on high quality, high skilled people. But at the same time, we also need to make sure that there are opportunities for people here already, whether it's in London, the South East, or in other parts of the country. And when we were in office, we had a great emphasis on tech apprenticeships, tutoring, doctoral places, and many other schemes that actually give people in this country lots of opportunities. I think the next phase of this is actually making sure tech education starts at a younger age, not just when you get to university. By that point, many people's preferences and interests are often solidified. I think getting younger pupils at schools and colleges much more involved in making informed choices about their careers is very important. But you're absolutely right that these topics around immigration, skilled and unskilled, illegal and legal, homegrown talent are all interconnected, and we need to make sure we get that right, because actually it is a big driver of the tech sector's future growth. And in terms of the environmental aspects of this, the UK is one of the few countries in the world that's actually grown its economy and decarbonised over the last 2 decades. We're actually world leaders in that. So I don't see it as a zero-sum game either. I think that actually when you go around the country as I do, you see very exciting, green, but also very successful techUK systems. And I think that's where we will carry on going in the future.
Brilliant. I think we've got time for one more round of questions before I need to bring it to a close. Just the lady on the front row on the left. And if I can take one more question, and then the lady in the middle segment as well.
Hi, Quivo O'Leary here with Dassault System. I was just wondering if I could ask the panel about the AI Action Summit and specifically your thoughts on the UK not signing the declaration at the end, and if you think that could cause any challenges with developing work with the EU.
Brilliant, thank you. And then just the lady here in the middle, just at the front, third row.
Good afternoon, Liga Rosenthal from CrowdStrike. I have a German degree, so I feel much more competent than those with the French degree to discuss the question. My question was, I understand that it's very popular to put national interests first and national innovation, but recognizing the geopolitical changes in the world, how can the UK and EU work together so that there's a win-win solution and find more competition for both companies in the EU and the UK?
Fantastic. So we managed to get through 30 minutes before getting on to geopolitics. So with 5 minutes left, let's tackle this. So any thoughts on the AI Action Summit and the decision by the UK government not to sign up to the declaration? And then more broadly, how you see UK and EU working together on what is a sort of a joint ambition to grow the tech sector, deliver for our citizens, etc. Alan, perhaps I can start with you on this one.
Well, I think the AI Action Summit was emblematic of Labour's approach to global leadership on lots of tech issues. So everyone here will know that it was started by Rishi Sunak, and we had the first one at Bletchley Park. We convened world leaders, and the Prime Minister led from the front. In the most recent summit in Paris, Keir Starmer didn't bother to go to it. When the US Vice President, the Indian Prime Minister, the Italian Prime Minister, obviously the French President, lots of world leaders went there, but our Prime Minister didn't turn up. So that just gives you a sense of how they've really had a dereliction of responsibility on the world stage when it comes to global leadership. And I think that I hope that in the future, the Prime Minister will go to these summits because they are important for asserting Britain's global leadership in tech, particularly AI and particularly AI safety. As to the Charter, obviously that's for Labour to explain why they thought it wasn't the right approach. But the key thing in global summits is to turn up and be present and to speak up for the UK. And I think that in such a fast-moving, important sector, not even going, and it's not very far away on the Eurostar, really is a very poor signal to the world that Labour just don't care about Britain's role on the global stage when it comes to AI. And in terms of the sort of EU approach, look, the reality is we left the EU, and that gives us an opportunity to be a smarter environment in terms of regulation. So we've repealed over 2,000 pieces of red tape. It gives us an opportunity not to adopt the EU's fairly anti-competitive statist approach to AI. Even President Macron called it anti-competitive. So it gives you a sense of how bad the EU's AI Act actually is. But obviously we do collaborate, and we particularly want the EU to be a market for UK startups and to be a market for UK products and services. So the key thing is that we do collaborate in terms of knowledge sharing, in terms of lots of other sort of areas of common sort of challenges around the environment, etc. But ultimately, the UK is going to be and is a distinctive technological market. We are Europe's number one, and actually we want to be one of the world's superpowers, not just a leading European tech power.
Brilliant. And Kirsty, I mean, on the UK-EU relationship, obviously the government's pursuing a reset. Where do you see sort of the tech angle to that sort of being?
Yeah, I think the two questions from the audience are linked actually in terms of what does the EU's approach to regulation in the tech sector really look like? I mean, on the declaration from the summit, I think the intention of the French chairs was to try and include a bunch of risks and issues that we know are associated with AI in terms of impact on workers, bias, other social impacts, which are all right and legitimate things to think about and absolutely need to be tackled, but meant that in the end it lost the core focus on safety and security, which was the genesis of the original UK-hosted summit and which I think is still the main focus of the AI Security Institute. And I think that, not having meaningful progress on the core issue of AI safety and alignment, was a real missed opportunity and probably the right decision by Keir Starmer not to go, given that. I think the sort of wider question about where the EU is going to take its kind of approach on tech is a really tricky and interesting one for us, in that there will be issues where the right answer is to maintain as close kind of coherence as possible and try and reduce the burden for companies that want to come and operate in Europe geographically. And there will be areas where, and I think the AI Act is one, where the EU moves first and goes too far. And I think, as you said, like even some EU leaders are recognising that that's the case, and therefore the UK's opportunity and sort of duty will be to figure out a differentiated, more sophisticated, more nuanced approach and put that in place. I think that was part of our value add inside the EU, and I think it's got to be part of what we do as a close and critical friend of the EU, helping to model where we can be a bit more agile, be a bit more light touch, and kind of co-design regulation with industry so that we're getting the right outcomes for the public interest, but permitting the maximum space for innovation and for growth.
And Janet, to close us out.
Can I talk from a business perspective, because I'm less plugged into the policy side, is we take businesses out to Europe all the time. So tomorrow we're taking a group of climate tech businesses out to Berlin. It's what we call a fast track mission, day and a half. When we go out there, and I was in Paris about a month ago doing the same thing with a group of businesses, there's an ambition to work together. When you're business to business, they really want to collaborate. There's a real openness from the corporates, from some of the stakeholders. We've got London Tech Week coming up in June. What we do with London Tech Week, there's also Viva Tech, for any of you who've been over. Fabulous conference, very different to London Tech Week, but we attract these global speakers and businesses to do both. And then we take a group of entrepreneurs by about the Wednesday of London Tech Week on Eurostar over to Paris, and then we look after them at Viva Tech. That's collaboration. And I think the more we can do just to keep on the ground, forging those connections, those relationships, as well as what's happening on the policy side, I think we will drive that collaboration that's needed across Europe.
I think that's a really fantastic sentiment to end on, because I think we can often get lost in the sort of policy conversations that happen at sort of almost an abstracted level, but fundamentally our businesses do want to work together, and it's about, most of all, how can we get out of their way. So I guess on that note, I will bring this session to a close. Thank you so much to my panellists.
Thank you.
Thank you.